Well, I want to start by saying on behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, thank everybody for joining us today on the CEU webinar. Today, we will be hearing from Consumer Reports about backseat technologies and some of their backseat ratings. My name is Emily Burton, and I'm the vehicle manufacturer representative to the National Child Passenger Safety Board. We will have planned time to answer questions at the end of the presentation. And today's speaker, we have Emily Thomas here from Consumer Reports. So real quick, before we get to that, as a reminder, attendees are requested not to participate in this webinar if you're operating a motor vehicle. The webinar will be recorded and you can listen to the recording when you safely arrive at your destination. The recording will be posted to carseateducation.org. That's carseateducation.org within 1 to 2 business days. And for the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, the presentation qualifies for one continuing education unit. Attendance in the webinar is required for at least 45 minutes for the CEU credit, and proof of attendance will be emailed to you within 24 hours of the webinar. So please join me in welcoming Emily Thomas. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Emily. So I'm going to share my screen.
Perfect, we got it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And heads up, I made a lot of slides, but I'm going to move through them quickly. And I think we should be good. So I am the manager of auto safety at Consumer Reports Auto Test Center in Colchester. And what that means is this is our facility. We test vehicles, we test tires and child seats. For the auto safety program, I oversee our child car seat program as well as the rear seat safety evaluations for all the test vehicles. And I'm going to be talking to you about both of those today. So to start off, we'll begin with the child seat test program. Our overall score is broken up into 3 main areas. We look at ease of use, fit to vehicle, and crash protection. In our ease of use, we're really looking at how is the average person going to be using the seat? What are the potential areas for misuse? All the different adjustments that need to be made, are they easy to accomplish? Is it difficult to access these things like harness adjustments and crotch buckle adjustments, the lower anchors, where do you store them? Where do you keep the manual? Belt routing, all of these different areas. We really want to look to see where there's potential misuse opportunities and evaluate based off of that. We also look at the labels that are on the model itself. One of the key things we try to drive home is making sure that if there is restrictions on usage on the seat, that the seat itself has that labeling right at those points of touch. So for instance, for all of the different inserts that come with your car seats, if you can only use them up to a certain weight limit, then we like to see that right there on the insert itself, because we all know that people don't hold on to their manuals, or they have it but they don't open it. And so whatever can be put onto the seat labels itself that is really important for your everyday use and to ensure that there's no misuse, then we're looking for those things. Things like chest clip location, how to know when you should adjust the harness height, proper routing, all of these different areas. We do also give credit if the seat has Spanish labels, and later you'll see also if it comes with Spanish instructions. So we do the same evaluation with the owner's manuals as well. If they do open the owner's manual, does it have all the information that they would need? And is it outlined clearly? Are there pictures? Do the pictures match the text? And do they match the seat? We do look for harmony between the labels and the owner's manual to make sure that there's no discrepancies that would lead to confusion. We want to make sure that for soft goods, how to remove the soft goods for cleaning is described in the manual, how to clean them properly, and how to put them back. If you've taken soft goods off before, you know that sometimes taking it off is way easier than putting it back on, especially if the instructions only tell you to reverse your steps. So we want to make sure that all these things are properly outlined in the owner's manual for the consumer. We also look for things like sources of installation help. So, does the manual tell them where they can find a CPST? And we also look to see, with the labels and the manuals, are there videos that the consumer can access from the manufacturer? So sometimes they include like online instructions or online video instructions. It has to actually be instructions about installation. It can't just be a marketing video. So we do watch to make sure that there's, verified videos available from the manufacturer itself. So our Fit to Vehicle program is unique to us. We use 5 test cars that have varying geometry. These vehicles are chosen because they have aspects that are challenging and that make child seat fitment challenging. We do our installations in every unique seating position for each orientation of the seat and each installation method. So on average, that can be approximately 40 individual installations per model that goes into the ratings. And our current ratings has approximately 5,000 individual installations that goes into them. And that's the minimum. Like oftentimes we have to do multiple installs in the same seating position in order to see, can we get a better fit? Are there any tips or tricks that we can provide as well to help them to get a better installation? And everyone that's on our team and everyone who does the Fit to Vehicle installations, they're all CPSTs. Sorry. So these are the 5 cars that we use for our test program. These are vehicles that are representative of family vehicles. And as I mentioned earlier, they're all chosen because they have unique aspects to them that are challenging in their geometry. So it could be things like really steep C-pan angles that would make getting a proper recline difficult. Buckles and belt anchors that are forward of the seat bite, integrated head restraints, large waterfalls, just all the different things that make it really tough sometimes to get a good install, wide belt anchor spacing, perhaps top tether locations that are, very close to the vehicle, seat back, lower anchors that are close to the seat cushions, things of that nature. And so the idea is that if the car seat can be installed securely in these vehicles that are challenging, then the likelihood that you can get a good install at home in your car that's perhaps not as challenging is higher. So we look at whether or not we're able to get a secure installation, but we're also looking at the car seat's compatibility with the vehicle. Is there enough room to get the installation? How does it impact the adjacent seating positions? Are you able to close the door if you have the seat installed in the outboard seating position? Some car seats are very wide, very bulky. And so putting in that outboard seat can be really tricky because it just extends beyond the edge of the seat so much that it's really pressing up against the vehicle door and makes it difficult to close it. Is there interference with the vehicle head restraint? For rear-facing seats, how does that impact the front passenger room? Are you able to fit a front passenger in front of that rear-facing seat or not? Things of that nature are all included in our evaluation. So for boosters, we do an additional evaluation, which is fit to child. So we're not just looking at how does the booster fit within the vehicle, but really how does this booster help the belt fit for the child. And so we do this using a non-instrumented hybrid 2 6-year-old crash test dummy. And essentially we're looking for a caregiver level assessment. So are we able to get proper shoulder and lap belt fit with this booster? And we do an additional bit of a quasi-static movement where we will take the crash test dummy and move her forward and side to side and repeat that 2 to 3 times to simulate movement of the child, because we know that kids are not crash test dummies and they move around in their seats. So when they do that, does the seatbelt come back through organically through the shoulder belt guide and remove the slack, or is there perhaps too much friction in the shoulder belt guide design, or just the way that it routes through, so that now you're left with all this additional slack in the seatbelt. So this is one of the things that's different about our belt fit evaluation. So moving into our crash protection, we have developed our own crash protocol, which is designed to be different from the federal standard and be more representative of current vehicle geometries and stiffnesses. And it's run at a higher speed than the federal test. So there's a few main ways in which our test is different. One is that our crash sled uses an actual vehicle seat. And so we're using the 2009 to 2012 Ford Flex captain's chair from the second row. And this has geometry and stiffness that's more representative of the vehicle fleet. We also use a simulated front seat back, our blocker plate. And what this does is that it allows for us to look at the interaction between the head for rear-facing seats, and then it allows for lower extremity interaction in forward-facing tests. Additionally, our crash pulse is a higher severity crash pulse than the regulatory tests. We use a 35G, 35 mile per hour pulse, and this allows for us to differentiate seats compared to the regulatory minimum. And then lastly, we have a simulated floor surface to allow for us to test for additional innovations like load legs. So we developed our blocker plate by using video analysis of the front seat movement in vehicle frontal crash tests. And essentially, it was designed to have built-in rotational capability. So in a real vehicle, there is some flexibility to that front seat back during a crash. It will rotate forward during a frontal crash. And so we wanted to account for that on our sled, but it's too difficult to have it be repeatable, like that exact same amount of flexibility for every test. So we built in the rotational capability as part of our test setup. So when we are installing the seat on the sled, the car seat on the sled, the blocker plate is set to 78 degrees. And we then translate it fore aft until it meets the manufacturer specifications for a rear-facing seat. So whether that is just touching, if it's braced, if it's an 1.5 inch gap, whatever it might be, we will translate the blocker to that. And then after we bolt it down, we then rotate it up by about 10 degrees, which accounts for approximately 4 inches of movement that you might see during a real crash. And so this allows for the car seat to then have that additional movement and have the room for it that it would also have in a real crash. For forward-facing tests, the blocker plate is set at 28.5 inches from the lower anchors, and that's for all forward-facing tests. Our simulated floor, it allows for us to test innovations, like I mentioned, specifically load legs, and we wanted to be representative of vehicle floors. In real cars, right, the vehicle floor is a much larger piece of metal with bumps and ridges. And so because of the way that the load leg interacts with the vehicle floor, though, it tends to be more of a point load. So it's okay to have a smaller piece that you're using for the sled purposes. And so unfortunately, the regulatory test lacks a floor. So car seats that have a load leg have to pass the regulatory test with the leg folded. So they're not gaining the additional benefit that a load leg provides. But in our testing, we're able to test with it and help us see what that benefit is in the crash numbers. So the key differences between our crash test and the federal standard is that we are using cushion from an actual vehicle. We have implemented a simulated front seat back. We also have a simulated vehicle floor. We're running our tests at a higher severity, a higher energy pulse, and we're meant to provide comparative ratings for consumers, unlike the regulatory test, which is a pass-fail test. So why do we use a higher energy pulse? And this is a quote from a paper that was discussing the NCAP program, or the New Car Assessment Program, which also tests at a higher speed than the regulatory crash tests. And really it's that when you have the regulatory crash tests at one speed, that's your compliance pass fail. And if you want to determine crash worthiness differences, you have to go beyond that minimum. You have to go beyond the regulatory standard. And so raising the speed allows for us to more easily distinguish any crash worthiness differences. So our crash protection rating is not a pass-fail test, as I mentioned. It's comparative ratings of relative performance within a peer group. So infant seats are rated against infant seats, convertibles against convertibles, etc. The three ratings that you can get are basic, better, or best. And this is really helping us determine, what additional margins of safety are you getting from the results of our crash test from this model. And just as a note, all seats that get a basic rating in our evaluation are still considered to be safe because these seats still have to meet the minimum federal standard. And we're making comparative judgments on additional margins of safety, not deeming them as like a fail. Our crash score is based off of statistical analysis looking at three main injury metrics. We're looking at head injury criteria and the upper neck forces, axial forces. We also look at head contact to the blocker for rear-facing models, and this is an additional deduction from the final crash score. So there's two main ways that you can get a basic rating. It can either be due to statistically significant higher injury metrics than your peer group. So the head injury numbers, the neck force numbers are a lot worse than the rest of your peers. Or it could be from a structural integrity issue that compromises the seat's ability to secure the child, or compromises the seat's ability to stay securely installed to the vehicle seat in a subsequent crash event. And when I say subsequent crash event, what I really mean is that in the real world, we know that most crashes are multiple events, but in the laboratory, we can only simulate, a very idealistic single event crash. And so knowing that in the real world, there's probably going to be a secondary event, we want to make sure that that child is still going to be able to be properly retained by the child seat, or that the child seat stays secured to the vehicle seat. So kind of moving into how the ratings are. So our general philosophy is that if you can't use the seat properly or get a secure installation in the vehicle, then you can't expect optimal crash protection. So as a result, we weight ease of use and fit to vehicle higher than crash in our overall score. In our fit to vehicle ratings, it is broken up by belt installation and by latch install. And so we do apply the latch limits to the fit to vehicle ratings. Essentially what that means that if you have a seat that is lighter, right? And so you're able to use that and install that seat with the lower anchors for most of the weight capacity of that seat, then it will influence how we distribute the weight between the fit to vehicle latch and fit to vehicle belt. So for a lighter seat where you can use the lower anchors for the full harness weight capacity, the fit to vehicle scores would be equally weighted for latch and for belt. But let's say you have a really heavy seat and you're going to have to make that switch from lower anchors to a seatbelt install a lot sooner because you're going to meet the lower anchor weight limit. So in that case, we would weight the belt fit to vehicle score heavier than we would weight the lower anchor fit to vehicle score. So in September, we made our car seat ratings free for everyone. We have a great new Babies Hub, consumerreports.org/babies, where you can access the free ratings and lots of other advice and recommendations for other baby gear. We also now have a free car seat finder tool specific to infant seats. We're working on expanding it to other car seat types as well, and a new overview page. And so there's lots of information there, lots of free education, articles, and such, and you can access all the ratings, as I mentioned. So we also had a chance for the for Child Passenger Safety Week last year to do a podcast episode for the Consumer Reports Talking Cars podcast from the Crash Lab, kind of talking through and showing you really what we do for our crash test and all the different aspects that I explained. It's a pretty fun episode. I nerded out a lot and got to talk about it. Just to give you a small teaser, I'm going to play the opening.
Firing!
So hopefully that teased it up enough for you that you'll want to watch the rest of the episode.
Firing!
Okay. So with the launch and with the new infant car seat finder, we added 2 ratings and specifications to our ratings charts. And so one is our fit to vehicle carrier only rating. This is an independent rating that does not go into the vehicle's overall score, but really it is to help families that rely on rideshare or travel a lot, don't have their own vehicle, things of that nature, to be able to assess how well the infant seat that they have does for carrier-only installations. Secondly, we added a specification called Good Small Car Fit. And what that is looking at is for rear-facing infant seats, right? How much front passenger room are you really able to get? So we know that for smaller vehicles, this can be really challenging for families, and we want to make sure that it's easy for them to know. So we used a combination of data points for the infant category, looking at carry handle restrictions, as well as our fit to vehicle rating to see in our fit to vehicle scores for each of the test cars, did we find that the front passenger room was cramped or unusable. Moving forward, as we expand this to convertibles and all-in-ones, we'll be creating a more standardized method that's more easily applied across the categories. So that will be coming soon. So another thing that's coming soon, this is definitely a teaser. It should be rolling out in the next couple of weeks, but we are making some changes on our website. So the first one is down here on the bottom. We are renaming our toddler booster category, which is also known as harness to boosters, forward-facing only combination seats. So we're renaming that as harness to boosters. Quite a few reasons for that. One of the big ones being that we wanted to get away from using the word toddler next to booster and creating confusion there. But we knew that people were searching for boosters or really searching for that category in that way, which is why we had held on to that for a good while. But also, the tides have changed and people are more educated, they're more aware about child passenger safety, and there's a better understanding that, toddlers don't belong in booster seats, or, they should already be forward facing. And so we feel comfortable making that change, knowing that people have a better understanding of what we're talking about now. So we are renaming the category as harnessed booster seats. And we are doing a change where we're going to be combining the all-in-one convertibles and combination seats into one category called harnessed car seat. So this will roll out in the next week or two, I believe. And so you should see that there, and hopefully it makes things a little bit easier. So some quick highlights from the child seat program. and just to understand a little bit more about the testing. So for the infant seats, we test with the 12-month Krabby. If the harness capacity of the seat extends beyond 22 pounds, then we will also use our weighted 12-month Krabby. And what this is it's a regular 12-month Krabby, so its height hasn't changed, it's still 29 inches, but using the weight distribution of the 18-month Krabby, we add an additional 8 pounds to it. So this is done with a torso jacket, arm and leg cuffs, and a beanbag in the head. And what that weighted dummy does, it allows us to test for structural integrity for those higher harness capacities. Convertibles and all-in-ones have essentially the same crash test matrix for the harnessed modes, and we are focusing on the core usage of 3-year-olds rear-facing, 3-year-olds forward-facing, and then looking at the structural integrity condition with a weighted 6-year-old. All of our forward-facing crash tests are done with a top tether, so we don't do any test conditions without it. And if we see that there's a structural integrity issue at the weighted 6-year-old test condition, again, if the seat's harness capacity allows for that weight limit, then we will kind of fill in the gap between the 3-year-old and the weighted 6 by doing an instrumented 6-year-old run. And so this will kind of help us to better inform consumers and give them advice as to what to do if there are structural integrity issues. And then also just to note for the all-in-one seats, they will also get booster fit, but not crash for booster mode. One of the findings that came out of our crash testing when it came to rear-facing infant seats and convertibles was that really we found a greater frequency of head contact with the 12-month Krabby in a rear-facing infant seat than we did see with the rear-facing convertibles. And so as a result, our recommendation has been for quite a few years now that if parents have not done so already, then they should switch their child from a rear-facing infant seat to a rear-facing convertible or all-in-one no later than the child's first birthday to give them that additional head protection. So the toddler booster matrix, which again, soon to be the harness booster category, is all forward-facing with the 3-year-old, 6-year-old, and the weighted 6 as applicable. For booster seats, we no longer do any crash testing for that, just because the design of our current crash test really helps to differentiate margins of safety for harnessed seats. But with the booster, you're really using the vehicle's restraints, and so the sled environment that we have, or the test that we have right now, is not a good differentiator. But from our Booster Fit program, we have found that when you're looking at belt fit for high back to backless models, and you're comparing the belt fit in high back mode versus the belt fit in backless mode, when you remove the back off of those models, there's quite a few things that happened. You're losing that shoulder belt guide, which can really impact the shoulder belt fit, right? Many of them come with that backless belt clip. However, we know that most people don't use them, that the moment that the child moves, they fall right off the shoulder, and so they're not very effective. We also know that the lap belt really suffers because when you remove the back off of these models, now the child is sitting further back by several inches against the vehicle seat, but the lap belt path for the backless portion of the model has not moved. It's still in the same place. And so now the child is sitting further back. The lap belt path is still pretty far forward, and now the belt is really sitting across their thighs and not across the strong parts of their hip bones. You lose those side wings that kids are more accustomed to in the high back mode, which personally I found for my son when he went from his forward-facing harnessed seat to high back booster, he really liked having the side wings for additional comfort. It was what he was used to. He was used to that kind of that cocooned environment. And also that side impact protection that comes with having those wings. And additionally, if your vehicle doesn't have an adequate head restraint, or there's no head restraint in certain seating positions, then you're really limited as to which seating positions you can use with just a backless booster. So our recommendation really is that for models that are high back to backless, to keep the back on. Not to transition to just using it in backless mode unless it's absolutely necessary and unless you have a model where the backless belt fit is still really good. So moving to our vehicle program and the rear seat safety score. So why do we have a rear seat safety score? Why are we paying attention to this? And that's because we really believe that child passenger safety is more than just car seats, right? People hear about CPSTs and that's what it boiled down to often for them, but really we are concerned with the safety of children in vehicles from newborn all the way up until 18. And we want to make sure that whether they're in their car seats or whether they are relying on the vehicle's crash management system and the advanced restraints in the vehicle, that they are being well protected. And also because regardless of where you're sitting in the car, you should have the same amount of crash safety available to you. So for many years, the backseat was a lot safer because, you know, we were seeing a lot more injuries and fatalities to drivers and front passengers. And as a result, there was a lot of technology added to the front seat to reduce those injuries and fatalities, which was great. But because we also didn't apply similar technologies or similar efforts to the backseat, that gap has slowly diminished over the years. And so we really want to make sure that we are paying attention to the rear. We also know that from some survey data that CR did back in April of 2022, which is a nationally representative American Experiences survey, that 1 in 10 Americans had an unbelted rear passenger. And this was, you know, asking about their driving in over a month's time. And so we know that with more multi-generational homes, more carpooling, more rideshare, that it's not also just kids in the backseat. You know, there's also our loved ones, our adults that are also sitting in the backseat as well. And looking at the National Occupant Protection Use Survey data from NHTSA over the past few years, rear belt usage is typically at least 10 percentage points behind front seat belt usage. So we need to do things that's going to improve rear seat belt usage and make sure that those that are wearing their seat belts are also getting the benefit of the advanced restraints. To give you also a quick overview of what the crash test programs look like in the US and compared to the European NCAP program. So until recently, really, there were no rear-seated crash test dummies in the US crash test programs. The IHS updated their moderate overlap frontal test to add a 5th percentile female in the back seat. For side impact, there are rear-seated dummies in at least one US NCAP test and in the IHS test. And the IHS recently, in the past couple of years, updated their side impact test to be more rigorous. So they're continuing to raise the bar. So looking at just sort of the state of the industry, if we look at safety technologies that we see in the front seats and have proven effectiveness, and now looking to see their implementation in the back seat, you know, how much of the market has them. So looking over the past couple of model years, I cross-referenced the models that we have listed on the Consumer Reports website with the NHTSA Safer Car database to kind of get these numbers. So this is not representative of volume or sales, but rather just the models that are available in the market. And so really between model year 21, when we started this program, and model year 23, we see almost a 20% increase for seatbelt pretensioners and load limiters in the rear seat, which is great. Side torso airbags doesn't have as much of a jump, but we also know that with the updated IHS test that, you know, manufacturers are continuing to be held to a higher standard there, and that they're improving side impact protection for rear occupants as well. For rear belt minders, we're at almost 50% of new models of model year 23 had at least some type of rear belt minder. And for rear occupant alerts, there was quite a jump between model year 22 and model year 23 for vehicles that had even a basic rear occupant alert, which we're really excited about. So these numbers are improving. There's lots of room for more improvement, but it's exciting to see that we are making progress. So our rear seat safety score is really comprised of two components, child safety and rear occupant protection. We have been evaluating a few of these things for many years. And then in 2021, we launched this score and I made it a more comprehensive, holistic test. So we're looking at the presence and absence of features, and we're looking also at the performance of some of these systems. So under child safety, there's child seat fit, performance, booster use, and then rear occupant alerts, which is presence and absence as well as performance. Under rear occupant protection, there's rear head restraints, rear belt minders, which is also a performance-based evaluation, and advanced restraints, which is just presence and absence. So we'll start off with harness child seat fit. Now this is really focused on seatbelt installations in our evaluations. And that's because we know that the IHS has done a great job of improving latch accessibility and labeling through their ratings program, and many manufacturers responded very well to that. But we also know that you don't have lower anchors in every seating position, and we know that there are weight limits to the lower anchors. And so eventually families will have to move to a seatbelt install. They might need to do a seatbelt install if they're using a center seating position. And so we want to make sure that regardless of where they are in the vehicle, that they can get a secure seatbelt installation. So we're doing installs in every test car, in every unique seating position in the rear, and every orientation of the seat. So we use 2 infant seats that have varying base designs and a convertible car seat for these evaluations. We also look to see if the vehicle manual matches the rear seat geometry, just to ensure that we're not going to have additional misuse and confusion. We do latch accessibility, mainly trying to see from a caregiver level, can they easily attach to the anchors? Is it easy for them to access the tether anchor? Do they have to remove head restraints? Do they have to remove cargo covers? Go through the rear hatch, things of that nature, things that might make it more cumbersome for them and less likely to attach that top tether. And then finally, we do a 3 across the second row bench evaluation, which is really just looking to see, can you physically fit 3 car seats across that second row? And that uses a forward-facing convertible infant seat and high back booster. So for child seat fit, some of the common challenges that we find are things that I'm sure many of you see in the field as well. You have buckles that are forward of the seat bite, plastic hinges, overlapping geometries between adjacent seating positions. Sometimes I see really large waterfalls at the seat bite that make it very difficult to get those car seat bases, snug up against the vehicle seat bite. With more of the 3-row SUVs and minivans and such, in that second row can be really challenging to get a secure install when the seatbelt anchorages are on the pillar of the vehicle. And so you have to really play with the second row vehicle seat recline and track position in order to get that tight install. And these are all tips and tricks that you and I have in our bag, but most people don't. And so, how do we kind of know what works, and how do we inform consumers about how they can get a good installation? Looking at booster fit, we want to make sure that you can get a proper booster fit and easy buckle access. So we do look at the compatibility between boosters and the vehicle seat, head restraint, interference, stability on the vehicle seat. Are the bolstering and the cushion height differences between like the center seating position and outboard seats, do they contribute to instability of the booster? And just making sure also that the booster doesn't overlap with any adjacent seating positions. So like when we do our evaluation, we're really treating each seating position independently and trying to see, how would this impact if you were trying to have somebody else sit next to the booster or install another child seat there. So again, some of the common challenges that we see here, we often see that the booster footprint can be wider than the space that's available on the seating cushion, especially if there are really prominent bolsters. It can make it so that that seat cushion has a very narrow footprint that's available even in those outboard seats. We can find that adjacent buckle hardware will push the booster forward and keep it from, sitting flush against the vehicle seat. We often find interference with the vehicle head restraint. If we have to remove the head restraint in order to get that booster flush against the vehicle seat back, then that's deductions, because we know that people are going to take off those head restraints and either throw them in the car somewhere and it's now a projectile, or they're going to put it in their garage, never to be found again when they need it for a belted occupant in that seating position. So moving into the rear occupant alerts, CR has actually been evaluating these systems since 2016. We've been independently evaluating them before we even began the official rear occupant alert and rear seat safety program. And as a result, we've gotten a chance to kind of see how the technology and systems have evolved over the years. So this really started with the 2017 GMC Acadia. So in our rear occupant alert evaluation, we are looking for standard equipped factory enabled systems. We've broken them up into end of trip reminders, occupant sensing, and gained access prevention. We don't really see a lot of gained access prevention. About 25 or about a quarter of the cases that have occurred are because a child gains access to the vehicle. So some vehicles have systems that will automatically lock, for example, if you walk away with the keys, but that's not super prominent. So we're really focused on the end of trip reminders and occupant sensing. For model year 23, as I mentioned earlier, almost 66% of the models were equipped with at least an end of trip reminder, which is really great. Many of the automotive manufacturers have signed a voluntary agreement that says that by model year 2025, they will have some sort of rear occupant alert in their vehicles. It's pretty vague language, so they could have a very simple end of trip reminder, and that would satisfy the agreement. But we really want to push manufacturers to keep improving and adding more rigorous systems that are capable of detecting children in the back seat. And so we also look at rear occupant sensing. As of model year 23, there's really only 3 brands that had any type of occupant sensing systems, Genesis, Hyundai, and Kia. So for the rear occupant alert, the end of trip reminder, we give credit if the vehicle has the system, but beginning with model year 24, in order to get that credit, the system must be standard equipped and factory enabled. So that means that when the consumer gets the vehicle, the system has to already be turned on. If you have to turn the system on yourself, there's no credit given to that vehicle. And really that's because we know that people don't believe this can happen to them. So the likelihood that they're going to take this very proactive step to go through the many vehicle settings and find the system, which is often really buried and in unusual places, and then turn it on is pretty slim. So it's better that this system is already activated for the consumer. We like to see these systems be both visual and audible because we know that triggering multiple senses is more likely to grab the driver's attention. If they exit the vehicle and have not accessed the rear and they go to lock the car, then there should be an additional external audible alert. And really this is to just try to intervene at every possible moment to prevent them from, leaving the child in the vehicle. We also test for a multiple drop-off scenario. Many of the cases that have occurred are because, there was or not because, but there was an older child that is dropped off at school, and now you still have a smaller child, younger child in the vehicle, but they're the one that gets unintentionally left behind. And so even if the rear door is accessed during the trip, do you still get a consistent end of trip reminder when you turn off the ignition? And we look to see, are there false positives? All of the testers at our facility, they use all of these cars for their personal use as well. So we take notes if anybody has experienced the end of trip reminder without accessing the rear, and then we do check tests to verify. For occupant sensing, right now, because there's so few on the market, we are still giving half credit if the system is optional. We want to incentivize manufacturers to implement them, and we want to reward the ones that are at least making an effort right now. We check to see what types of movement can the system detect. Is it gross movement? Is it very large movements that the child is making? Or are they more fine-tuned and can detect physiologic movements like the rise and fall of the chest, breathing, etc. We also want to see, is there a way that the vehicle notifies the driver, often through the telematics systems, the driver can get notified that motion was detected in the vehicle. But the system or the telematics come with subscriptions. But for a safety message like this and a safety notification, we really believe that it should be subscription free, and that the notification should be to the default on setting in the app. So that again, you don't have to go in and turn on these safety notifications. And additionally, if there's no intervention by the driver or somebody else, that there is an emergency contact that can be notified. So some brand insights for the end of trip reminders. Most brands have a basic end of trip reminder. These often use door logic. I hadn't mentioned that before. Is checking to see if the rear door was accessed just prior to or after turning on the vehicle, and that sort of acts as a surrogate that there's probably somebody back there. NHTSA has been tracking the voluntary agreement for the past 2 years. They have a docket where the manufacturers are submitting reports. So as of fall 2023, they've submitted their reports for model year 23. And of those, Mazda, Porsche, Audi, Volvo, and the JLR group, they did not have any vehicles in their fleet with end of trip reminders, but because the agreement is for model year 25, we expect that we should be seeing more this year. We already know that some model year 24 Mazdas are equipped with these. Some manufacturers still do have optional end of trip reminders, such as Volkswagen, Kia, and Nissan. These are often for lower trim lines or vehicles that they have that are manual transmission. There are a few that have factory disabled end of trip reminders. So you have to go in, you have to turn it on yourself. This is Nissan, Infiniti, and Mitsubishi. And then there's a small group that also have external audible alerts. So Nissan, Infiniti, Mitsubishi, Toyota, and Lexus. In our testing, we found that you can turn off these end of trip reminders, but we like that in the Ford vehicles, when you go to turn it off, that the vehicle tells you it's going to remind you in 6 months and ask you if you want to reactivate it, which we really like because life seasons change, and perhaps in 6 months' time you may want to turn them back on. So we like that it is prompting you. This is helpful information, I feel like, for you guys as you're in the field and you're working with families. Perhaps they don't know what safety systems their car comes with, but you would be able to help educate them and help them understand the nuances so that there isn't a false sense of security in terms of like what these systems are really capable of doing. The occupant sensing, as I mentioned, is really limited to Hyundai, Genesis, and Kia. They have it as both standard and optional in their vehicles. Hyundai and Kia primarily use ultrasonic sensors, and this has pretty good cabin range, but it really only detects large movements. In really all of these, they are limited by the motion detection is only activated after the vehicle is locked, right? So it doesn't help in a gained access scenario. Genesis has implemented radar sensors, which allow for more fine-tuned measurements, and so they can detect really small movements or sleeping children. So coming soon to the market, we have heard about the Volvo EX90, which incorporates radar sensors. The vehicle locking is going to be contingent on radar detection of an empty cabin, and it can temperature adjust if an occupant is detected. The Mercedes CLA is supposed to utilize multiple sensors, breathing sensors, camera, temperature sensors. It'll give you that alert at ignition off, and then also it can do a temperature adjustment of the cabin if it exceeds a critical point. So moving to rear head restraints, the federal mandate says that outboard seating positions have to meet a minimum head restraint height of 29.5 inches. But we really want to make sure that that's applicable to every seating position. We've all gotten into cars where the center seat either doesn't have a head restraint or has a very low head restraint. So we really want to make sure that there's adequate, head restraints in all seating positions. We want to see that the design encourages the use of the head restraint, but doesn't prohibit secure CRS installations. Again, we don't want head restraints being removed from the vehicle. Some manufacturers implement stowed designs to improve driver visibility. And in order to get credit for a stowed design in our evaluation, In the stowed position, the head restraint has to be uncomfortable and force adjustment for proper use. So things like, or designs rather, where the head restraint flips forward or is overlapping significantly with the vehicle seat back, those are really uncomfortable for someone to sit against and not realize they should adjust it. But designs that flip backwards can be quite comfortable, and the person doesn't know that their head restraint is not properly suited for them. So moving to rear belt minders, in September 2023, CR did another American Experiences survey, and we asked questions about rear belt minders to understand whether or not people have experience with them in their cars and how it might impact their behavior. 40% of American drivers say that they have a rear belt minder in a car that they drive regularly, which was very promising for us, very encouraging. And we asked them whether or not the reminder makes them more aware of their rear passengers' seatbelt status, and 74% of them said that it did. So that is also encouraging that rear belt minders are doing their job. It's helping the driver to be aware of the restraints in the vehicle and how they're being used. Around 3 in 4 drivers say that their passengers would buckle up if asked, and this is regardless of whether or not they have a belt minder in their car. Some of the data that we have from this study suggests that rear seatbelt alerts makes some drivers more likely to ask their passengers to buckle up, which is also encouraging. So in our belt minder evaluation, we are looking again for standard equipped factory enabled systems, and really we are looking for a 2-pronged system: buckle up reminder and an unbuckled status alert. Buckle up reminders should be at ignition on. It's telling you to put your seatbelts on. We want them to be visual and audible to really grab the attention of the driver and the rear passengers. It should escalate if the rear passengers remain unbuckled, and it should be prominently visible, to the driver so they know what's happening. Unbuckled alerts are what's actually more prevalent in vehicles right now. These will tell you if somebody unbuckles during a trip. We want to see them multimodal at all speeds, so there shouldn't be a speed threshold that suddenly now it's giving you an audible chime, but really anytime that they unbuckle during the trip, it should give you the audible chime as well. It should escalate if they stay unbuckled. If depending on the scenario, drivers are responsible for what's happening in their car, the driver can dismiss the alert if there's a legitimate reason for why the alert is going off. The rear passenger exited the vehicle, they used the wrong buckle by accident, things of that nature. We feel very strongly about buckle up reminders because while it's great to know that somebody unbuckled during the trip, if they never buckled up to begin with, an unbuckled alert is kind of useless. So we really want to encourage people to be buckling up, which is why we feel so strongly about having the buckle up reminders. Most of the buckle up reminders for model year 23 are visual only, and we are hoping to see that change. For the unbuckled alerts, most are visual and audible, but only some of them have escalation. The IHS does a rear belt minder evaluation that primarily focuses on front seat belt minders. They do also look at rear belt minders, but the requirements are slightly different. Ours go a little bit further than what the IHS is doing, and so together it should provide really robust belt minder systems. So these are some of the brands that don't have any type of rear belt minder as of model year 23. The GM Group, Stellantis, Audi, Mini, and Rivian. And really, there's only 2 that we've seen that have a multimodal buckle up reminder and unbuckled alert, and that's Subaru and Lucid. These use weight sensors in the rear seat cushion. So the limitation there is that they can't account for the weight of a child seat. And so like in the Subaru manual, it will tell you that if you're doing a latch installation of a child seat in the rear seat, to buckle the seatbelt behind the child seat so that it's not triggering the rear belt minder for that seating position unnecessarily. So last but not least, advanced restraints. We really want to increase belt usage by improving belt fit and adding crash protection. So we do look for adjustable anchorages, advanced seatbelt technology like pretensioners and load limiters. We do look at airbags to kind of see what manufacturers are putting in. As I mentioned before, there is work that's being done with the IHS that is also improving crash protection for the back seats. In your vehicle owner's manual, which is again another thing that you can help with the families at checkpoints is helping them understand where the airbags are in their car and which seating positions have advanced restraints. So typically on the page that describes the airbags in the vehicle, there will also be language about the side torso airbags in the back seats, as well as any pretensioners that may be available in the rear seating positions. And this is helpful for parents to know and caregivers to know. Perhaps they want to put their older children in those seating positions or their booster age children in those seating positions so that they can really benefit from the advanced restraint systems. Here are some images of like different belt comfort guides from our friends at Safe Ride News. They have a great resource on their website that gives you descriptions of what some of these different safety systems look like. So the IHS updated their moderate overlap frontal crash test. They put a rear-seated 5th percentile female dummy behind the driver. This dummy is also used often to represent a 12 to 13-year-old. And as a result of this test, many manufacturers are implementing advanced restraints in the back seat. They're improving their backseat safety. And the IHS also, for the 2024 Top Safety Pick Plus criteria, vehicles need to have a good or acceptable rating in the updated test, which includes this rear-seated dummy. So together between the IHS and the Consumer Reports ratings, we're really trying to incentivize manufacturers to be paying attention to the rear implementing safety systems that are proven and effective. So just here are again some of the brands that don't have seatbelt pretensioners or load limiters in their rear outboard seating positions as of model year 23. There's quite a few more that don't have side torso airbags in the rear outboard seats, but we've seen from the IHS testing that some models are able to pass the Side Impact 2.0 test without rear side airbags just because they are strengthening the vehicle structure in other ways to help protect those rear occupants. So our rear seat safety rating, as I mentioned, is broken up into the overall score and then the child safety and rear occupant protection scores, and that's what you'll see on our website. So on the vehicle model pages under ratings and specs for free, you'll be able to see the rear seat safety scores. You can find, the overall score, the child safety score, and the rear occupant protection score. And then we also have information about what types of rear occupant alert and the belt minder on that vehicle. We broke up the rear occupant alert into end of trip reminder and occupant sensings to help consumers better understand what's actually in their car, and so they don't have a false sense of security about what the system does. And that all is available for free. In the paid section, if you remember, in the road test report, we have a lot more detail about the installations and how the various safety systems work. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emily. We have lots of questions and really good ones too. So we're going to try and power through a couple here real quick. And I don't know if we can run long if we have a few extras. Early on in the presentation, you mentioned the waterfall related to the seat geometry. Can you explain what that is in relation to the vehicle challenges that you see?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I meant to get a picture. I had a feeling that this would happen, but then I didn't get a chance. So really when the where the vehicle seat back meets the vehicle seat cushion, right? Some manufacturers will almost have an additional piece of cushion that overlaps between the two. I've heard some manufacturers call it like a Tootsie Roll. Like it's an additional like hump of cushion right where the two planes meet. And I typically call it a waterfall just because I only heard one manufacturer call it a Tootsie Roll, and I didn't want to confuse everybody. But
So it's near the seat bite area.
Yeah, it kind of encompasses the seat bite area, and it can make it so that some are more prominent than others and like really protrude forward. And so depending on how much give there is to that cushion or just really how far forward it is, when you're doing your installations, you have a hard time really getting up against the vehicle seat back. You can't dig into the seat bite. Sometimes you're able to like kind of put the CRS base on top of the waterfall and it'll compress down as you're doing the install. But again, that's something that like we're gonna play around with as techs. We know to like try different things. A regular person or a parent is just gonna try to install it, be like, oh well, I guess that's as good as it gets, and then just leave it alone. So it makes it more challenging. We do try to highlight that when we put that in our road test report, like this is there, here's how you get around it. But yeah, that's one of the geometries. I will do better and have a picture next time.
Okay, thank you. How often do you evaluate and update your 5 test vehicles that you use for these? And how do you choose them? Do you use like the top selling vehicle in each category or?
So the average age of a vehicle on the road is, I believe, like 12.1 years. We actually recently updated our cars in the past couple of years. We updated our fit to vehicle fleet, so that they were a better representative of what's out there on the road right now. I know that we use vehicles that are popular, but also ones that have challenging geometries. So, you know, we are trying to also, because we're phasing in these cars right on top of current ratings, like we slide in our new models, car seat models into the current ratings. And so you're trying to add vehicles that are still representative, but are also giving very similar challenges to the ones that we were previously using. So for instance, like the Kia Rio replaced the Chevy Aveo. And so we really needed that small cabin with very similar geometries, a really tight, rear seat cabin, um, things of that nature. So, and we try to have a minivan, we try to have a 3-row SUV, which is why we have Telluride and we have the Pacifica in there. So there's a number of factors that go into it, but yeah, we're trying to be representative of the fleet, but also of the different things that make it really hard to install car seats.
Awesome. We have a few more questions and I'd like to try and get through them, but if you could stop sharing, I just want to run through the
Sure.
PR, our future, because it wouldn't let me share. And PR, an upcoming webinar real quick, and then we'll jump back to questions.
Sure.
Before you go, just a couple of announcements. We hope that you have enjoyed our webinar series. We're having a lot of fun delivering them. I took some notes myself on this one, so I learned a few things. And we hope you will join us in May for another community education webinar where Cass Herring from Safe Kids will present on mentoring and the role of a tech proxy. Visit the cpsboard.org/webinars, and that's the cpsboard.org/webinars to register or scan the QR code on your screen here to register for that. And also, we have been busy working on the 2024 Child Passenger Safety Technician Certification Training, and we need help from currently certified CPS instructors. So we are putting out a talent call. If you are interested in making a welcome video clip, please visit carseateducation.org/welcome video, and that's carseateducation.org/welcome-video to submit one of those. And the webinar recording will be posted to carseateducation.org within 1 to 2 days. For all of the CPSTs in attendance, the presentation qualifies for 1 CEU. Proof of attendance will be emailed to you within 24 hours. You must have entered the webinar. You must enter the webinar into your profile at cert.safekids.org in order to receive credit for this CEU towards your certification. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining us today. And if you do have to jump off, have a great day. And thank you to all of the CPSTs and all that everyone does to keep kids and their families safe. And with that, I will jump back to a few questions here and see if I can find them again. Maybe. There we go. Okay. You mentioned that some of your testing is done with the hybrid 2 6-year-old dummy, and somebody's wondering if there are any geometry differences between the hybrid 2 and the hybrid 3 6-year-old that's used in the FMVSS 213 testing.
To the best of my knowledge, and for the purposes that we're doing, I don't believe there are any significant differences that would impact our belt fit. Actually, Emily, I think you might know more about the hybrid 2 differences, so I might punt it to other Emily.
If there are, I think they're very minor, but I would have to take a closer look at them too.
Yeah, I don't believe that there are, certainly because we're not using it dynamically, right? I think that's really where the main differences between the hybrid 2 and the hybrid 3 would be for the 6-year-old, but we're just using it in this static belt fit, right? Where we're
Yeah.
even us moving the dummy forward and side to side, it's not anything that would really impact the biofidelity or the belt fit. So if there are differences, they're not significant to what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. The Kate at Safety Belt Safe USA says they are very keen to encourage NHTSA to adopt the blocker plate in their crash testing. Is that something that Consumer Reports supports?
Yeah, we certainly put it in our comments to NHTSA, but the final rule has come and there's no blocker plate and there's no floor. Two things that we strongly encourage them for. In one way, that makes my job easier because it allows for us to maintain a different environment that can test beyond the federal standard. But yeah, we did ask NHTSA about that.
Well, speaking of the floor, have you been able to quantify how much additional safety benefit the load leg provides?
So we actually have an article on our website that talks about the load leg and sort of the pros and cons with it. But in there, we talk about the fact that we saw a 46% reduction in head injury criteria between seats that had a load leg and seats that didn't. And this was just like a very simple percent difference analysis. It wasn't like a full-scale statistical analysis, but we certainly do see a safety benefit on the sled. So I'll cushion it with these few things, right? One, it's not a full-scale vehicle test. Stay tuned. CCHIPS, the Center for Child Injury Prevention Studies, is going to hopefully be doing some analysis looking at full-scale vehicle tests that had seats with load legs in it. But our testing is on a sled, and you see the most benefit when you have a load leg and rigid latch, because that child seat really just stays tied to the vehicle seat. There's very minimal movement. And then the next best is having even flexible latch with that load leg. So that being said, though, all load legs are not created equal. Every manufacturer implements different designs. And the other thing that we saw was that just because there's a load leg doesn't mean that we weren't having head contact with the simulated front seat back. So, things like shell height still really matter, even in a load leg seat. And if it's a short shell, then we were still seeing the dummy head move outside of the protection of the infant seat and make contact with that blocker. So there's quite a few factors, but I do encourage you to check our website for the article that we have on load legs.
Awesome. Thank you for that additional information. We have one question on high back versus backless boosters. And Emily Roberts noted that she's wondering if your data has been updated to reflect newer models, because many of the models on the slides maybe that you showed or on the website are discontinued models. Have more recent boosters been tested in that manner?
Yes. it's just an old screenshot. My apologies.
Okay.
Yeah, we recently updated our booster ratings. I want to say either at the very beginning of this year or right before the end of the year. So there are newer models on the ratings chart.
Awesome. Awesome. So many good questions in here. Lots of folks are wondering if they can get a link to these slides that you've shared because there was so much great information in them, or at least a link to the podcast episode that you shared and the location of the free car seat resources.
Sure. If you go to consumerreports.org/babies, or just go to consumerreports.org and you go to the babies link on the top, you'll get to the car seats ratings. And I will just put this in the chat for those of you that are here.
Perfect.
Well, I'm not sure. I'll put it in a chat. You might have to copy it over because I don't know if it's the same chat.
Okay.
But yeah, if you go to YouTube and you just search talking cars and I think that's like car seat crash, you'll find the podcast episode.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. One question about when you're assessing how easily caregivers can find things like top tether anchors and other, are you having actual volunteers come to try it to simulate the average parent, or are you doing this within your staff members or CPSTs who are already more familiar with them?
So for consistency, we do it with our staff. So they are CPSTs. In the vehicle program, I don't do an ease of use. We look at where the tethers are, the tether anchors are, and like what the manual says about how to access them, how to route your tether, and it's sort of more objective in that way, right? Where if the vehicle manual says must remove head restraint, well, then that I have like a checkbox for that and I can make an appropriate deduction, or must remove cargo cover, or it might not say that, but I have to remove the cargo cover because there's literally no other way to get there. Things of that nature. In the child seat test program, the ease of use is done by the technicians. And so they are more familiar, but they also have the experience and the keen eye to be knowing like where is the potential for misuse, right? Like, for example, if us as techs look at a seat and we can't find the things that we need to find, right? That's likely not good for somebody who has no idea what they're looking for.
Absolutely.
I know that there are other consumer programs like overseas where they do bring in some volunteers and things of that nature. Our program does not do that. It is technicians that are doing it, but we are trying to look at it through the lens of, would this be easy to find for the average person?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have two last questions. One is that Kate is very pleased to hear about the rename moving away from the toddler label. And she wants to understand if you've considered moving away from the infant to a rear-facing only seat to encourage consumers to think of rear-facing seats as suitable for children other than infants.
So we have not, but I think I would counter her argument with, I would not want to see children that are older than infants in infant seats.
So
Just
these
based
are
on,
the specifically the bucket style infant
Yeah.
seats.
yeah,
Okay.
so we do have a lot of education, even in the infant car seat finder, about keeping your child, rear facing longer. In the expanded finder that we're currently working on, there's a lot of education in there as well about, keeping your children rear facing up to the height or weight limit of their seat, and really moving them from that rear facing infant seat to a rear facing convertible or all-in-one. As I mentioned, from our crash test findings, we tested with that 12-month Krabi, and the 12-month Krabi is 29 inches. So even when it wasn't weighted, when it didn't have the additional 8 pounds, we saw a lot of head contact for many infant seats. And then we saw even more head contact when we added the additional weight onto it. And so we just firmly believe in making that transition from an infant seat to a rear-facing convertible or all-in-one, because you're going to get so much more shell height and so much more head protection. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that infant seats are really intended for beyond infant use. But I understand what you're saying, but I think for like, it's a hard balance of trying to really balance, best practice and how we think of things in a very technical space with how consumers understand information and like what they're looking for and how is it going to make sense to them. So I think kind of keeping it labeled as infant seats from a consumer-facing perspective is helpful in the mindset of like, oh, well, my baby's really small, right? This is the seat for them. When they're really small, when they're a little bit bigger, I can move them to this convertible or all-in-one, but I'm still going to keep them rear-facing. And like, frankly, that education itself has come a really long way. Like, people have way
It
more
has.
understanding about that. So that's kudos to all of you. You guys are doing that hard work.
Absolutely. And we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
One last question. Are you able to comment on any of the changes you expect to see based on the new side impact requirement from NHTSA for testing child restraints?
Not sure what to comment on exactly. We're eagerly looking forward to it all coming out. I'll say that. I think, one of the things is manufacturers we're very much in favor of the side impact standard, because for a long time manufacturers were able to say that they were providing side impact protection, but there was no basis for it, right? There was no accountability to what that meant. And so the fact that there's now a standard that is federally regulated is a really good thing. I suspect it might be more difficult to have the slim profile seats and still maintain good side impact protection. But you know what? Engineers are great and they can help with a lot of things. So I'm not going to limit them. But
Yep.
I mean, that might be one area that we do see some differences. But yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I think that wraps it up for today's questions. I want to thank you so much again, Emily, for all of the wonderful information you have shared with us. We will do our best to get the slides shared somewhere with everybody that's attended, because there was so much good information. So I really just want to thank you for your time